Thando, we really appreciate that you can be our guest speaker today. So before we begin our interview questions, could you take a moment to introduce yourself so that our audience can get to know you better?
Yes. Thank you for having me on to the Be a Career team. So, hey everyone, I'm Thando Jacobs, and I'm excited to be here. So, currently a certified business analyst consultant with 6 years experience in this space, primarily in financial services and higher education. And also, I am the founder and host of the Inside Business Analysis podcast, where I effectively have conversations around business analysis with a wide range of guests. And also, I volunteer as part of the Young Business Analyst community, which effectively aims to empower young business analysts on their journey in business analysis. And outside of that, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I have other things that I do. But yeah, that is me in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, you can connect with Thando on LinkedIn and follow the Inside Business Analyst podcast where the link Telegram has sent in the chat box. Personally, I really like the podcast and I strongly recommend you guys follow it. Okay, now let's dive into the interviews, Thando. Thando, we
Mm.
all know that you used to be a sales. So our first question for you is, what motivated you to transit from sales to BA?
Sure. So yes, so I worked in sales for about 10 years and I had a very varied range of roles. So sales, account manager, relationship manager, all of that good stuff. And I was working in banking at the time. Then I effectively just wanted a career change for many different reasons, which I'll come to later on. And when I was kind of thinking about career change, I knew that I wanted to get into tech, right? So that part was clear, but I wasn't sure about business analysis or whatever. I just knew that I wanted to get into the tech space and figure out how to make that switch. And in my pursuit of being like, I want to get into tech, at the time, I was actually doing a business management degree. So I was working at the same time and doing a degree in the evenings. And I was doing a business management degree. And in the business management degree, I was learning quite a few things which business analysts do, but at the time I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't, I didn't know. I just knew that, yeah, this is how you do. These are the things I'm learning in the business management degree. Funny enough, one day, one of my clients was a business analyst, and she started to kind of just tell me about what she does as a business analyst. And I was like, oh, that is so interesting. That I will check that out. And that's when, for me, the seed was planted to kind of look into the business analyst career. And that is effectively how that happened. Now, what motivated me to do it? I think really when I was kind of thinking about my career, I was thinking about, the kind of things I wanted out of my career. And there were 5 things I was looking for, I'd say. First thing I was looking for was a career which, again, I wanted to get into tech, right? But I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
spend another 6 years doing a degree in computer science to make the switch. So I wanted to look for a low barrier to entry type role. The second thing I wanted to look for was a role that I can continuously learn and continuously grow, and something that I won't feel like I'm stagnant and get bored with quickly. The third thing was I wanted a career that was very broad, and by broad I mean I could work in any industry, I could work in any country, right? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
limited to kind of the UK system, or I'm not limited to just healthcare, for example. And also, I wanted a career that allowed me to have an impact, not just to individuals, which I had in sales, but to have an impact at an organizational level. And the final
Mm-hmm.
thing, I also wanted a career that, had a very good, I guess, income projection, right, in terms of how much you can earn in a career. And that was one of the biggest things for me.
Okay, thank you. That's really so thoughtful reflection on how to align career aspiration with the role of business analyst. So, moving forward, so what do you think are the most important factors that have contributed to your successful transition?
I think, well, first of all, I had to learn that transition or just looking for a job in itself and kind of going through a career change, you have to really be invested in that. It's not something that you just kind of do. You have to really be invested. So whether you are changing careers or whether you are looking for your first job, you have to really be invested. And by invested, it could mean really putting in the time to craft a well done CV or putting in the time to really learn about interview skills and interview preparations, but also putting in the time to learn about the thing that you want to get into. So I want to get into business analysis. So I had to put in the time to learn about business analysis and really not just learn on the surface, but attend events like this, buy books, go to webinars, maybe even invest in getting a mentor to mentor me on that journey. And I think oh, eventually it pays off, and that's the key thing for me there. It's when you invest into something, eventually it will pay off. And I think if I'm to think about what contributed to my success, I'll probably say I just kept knocking on the door. I posted on LinkedIn recently that I applied. My transition was over an 18-month period. I'd applied to like over 1,000 jobs. I had gone to like 50 or so interviews, and I heard no many times. I got that unfortunately you're not successful in this application email over 1,000 times, but I kept knocking, I kept going. And it wasn't just keep going for the sake of it, like as a motivational thing, but it's keep going strategically. So learn about how do I stand out as a job applicant, right? That's where the CV comes in. How do I make sure that I sell myself in an interview and sound really well? And that's where learning about interview preparation comes in. And I think the combination of those two things is what ended up contributing to my success, alongside just making sure that I genuinely know about the BA role. I've learned it, I've got the experience and all the rest of it. So if I'm to sum up what my success kind of criteria was, that's probably the key things I'd say.
It's really inspiring. 1,000 application. Yeah, I think your sharing can help us really, how to say, give us confidence that I think anyone, if you want to take an effort, you can make it. Yeah. I'm sorry, just now, I think we skipped one question because maybe the slides just skipped that one. So this one is like before the transition, how I wonder,
Mhm.
how did you know that BA is the role that you want to be? Maybe, yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, research. I actually I spoke to so many people from quite a few different roles. So before I kind of made my decision to go into tech, for example, I remember speaking to an accountant because I was
Mm-hmm.
considering going down the accountancy route, and he was honest with me. He basically said to me, um, I might do well, but I'll be going against people who have masters in finance and they've done internships in other companies as payroll admins or whatever. And if I'm going to compete against them, I'm not going to really be that successful, or it needs to be very hard. So it was, that I appreciated those types of conversations. But the funny thing was, when I was speaking to people from tech, it was kind of the opposite. It was like, no, you could do it if you put in the work. And the people are like, you could do boot camps to learn coding, you could do boot camps to learn about QA, you could learn about project management, you could learn about business analysis. So I kind of did an initial research into all the different roles in tech that I just mentioned, plus others, UX, UI designer, all of them. I kind of did an initial thing. And my question really was, which one of these do I feel like I have the most transferable skills with? Because I didn't want to start from put myself, in a kind of the worst position. It was like, which one of these can I tick the box with the most? And
Mm-hmm.
which ones of these would the transition, because I remember I'm transitioning, which one of these would the transition make sense? And business analyst for me came up far above all of them. Project management was another consideration. And I know a lot of people kind of think BA versus PM, which one should I do? And I think for me, what ended up being the deciding factor was the more I looked into what a project manager does and what a business analyst does, the business analyst role was more appealing to me.
Okay, thank you. I think your way of tackling this problem make me think that making decision is all about getting the right information so that you can make decision based on the information that you have get. Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, so um, can you talk more in detail about what kind of preparations that you have made for this transition so that our audience can have a better idea of what they need to do in detail?
Okay, so there are five things or five. I've kind of summarized what I did in 5 steps. Obviously, it was a lot more than 5 steps, but these are kind of the key things that I did. So the first thing was to really determine if business analysis is for you, right? like I
Yeah.
mentioned, learn about the role in some idea. What exactly does a business analyst do? What are the roles and responsibilities? And then when you do that, you then start to get a sense of, does this feel right for you? Does it sound exciting to you? Can you see yourself doing this for at least 5 years, for example? And for me, the
Mm-hmm.
answer was yes. So that was the first thing. So determining whether the role is for you or that profession is for you. You don't have to get into the detail, but just having conversations with other business analysts, you can just kind of gauge whether you're feeling it or not, right? So that's the first thing. The second
Mm-hmm.
thing was to then put in my time to learn about business analysis, right? Like what specifically, it's learning about things like requirements, learning about process modeling, learning about the difference between waterfall and agile, for example, learning
Mm-hmm.
requirements elicitation techniques and all of that good stuff and how that works and how that fits in with the project, learning about the role of a BA in the context of other roles. So what exactly is a BA? Why is a BA needed in a project? And just learning about the fundamentals of business analysis, which there's a couple of ways you could do it. You can, and part of the reason why it took me 18 months was because I kind of did the self study route, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I bought books, I was going to free webinars like this, I was attending, watching videos on YouTube and all that good stuff. So that's one way to do it. But if you
Mm-hmm.
if if you don't want to pay with time, you can pay with money, meaning you can buy a course or you can get mentoring and somebody can fast track that learning for you, so to speak, right? So that's tangibly how you can specifically do that. But once you learn kind of the basics of the fundamentals even of business analysis,
Mm-hmm.
then what I did was I started to apply for jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
I fell flat on my face immediately. Then I realized that actually what I need to do, knowledge is not enough in the business analysis space. You need experience. So I started to create my own experience. What that means is all of that knowledge that I had, I was working in sales. I started to ask myself, how can I implement business analysis techniques in my sales job? What does that look like? So when I was talking to a client, in sales, we would have called it understanding the customer needs, but in business
Mm-hmm.
analysis, we would have called it you know, eliciting requirements. So I started to effectively write down what the customers were asking or what they were telling me. You know, they'll say things like, "We're looking for this and that, and we have this problem, that problem," and then I'll say to them, "Okay, so you're telling me that your requirements are boom." So I started to write what they were telling me as requirements. The second thing I did was I actually started to model processes that we had, the sales process that we had in the team. And funny
Mm.
enough, when I was doing that, again, you don't have to, you don't need permission to do that. You can model a process because you know the process. You are the person who's doing it, right? So you can model the process in
Yeah.
your current job. And I started to go to my manager and say, "Oh, I've actually realized that if we change this part of the process, it will improve our sales or it would improve our leads." And I started to
Mm-hmm.
have these types of conversations now with senior leaders in the team. And that's how I kind of started to create my own. I effectively just became a business analyst overnight. And even though a bit
Mm-hmm.
like, oh wow, like that's really impressive that you're taking this initiative, and all the rest of it. And that's tangibly how I then started to create my BA experience. So then when I started to go to interviews, that's what I spoke about, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also on my CV, that's what I put. And the fourth thing for me was then kind of talking about CV is making sure that you put in the time to craft a CV that will sell you well. And number two, putting in the time to get your interview techniques and interview preparations done right. And those are the two
Yeah.
things that honestly you that's how you learn a job. If you think about applying for a job as a project, your first gate or your first thing that you need to do is to get an interview. To get an interview, you need to make sure your CV stands out. And the second thing you want is to get a job offer. To do that, you need to make sure that your interview techniques are on point. And the final thing is just connecting and building your professional network on LinkedIn. And you never know where your opportunity will come from. So being active on LinkedIn and reaching out to people is played a part in my job. So that's specifically the things that I did.
Oh, really? You are really, I think you really prepared very well from the start. You do research to make the decision to transit, and then you have a learning process, and then you create the experience based on your learning about this job, and also
Mm.
you uh, prepare for the interview and the CV, and then lastly the collection. Yeah, is that right? So my question is, I have a further detailed question is, uh, can you tell us generally how long does the learning process and the how to say the creation process can give some general idea about how long does it take? I mean, the learning process and uh the time that you use to create experience to prepare
Oh,
for that. Yeah.
how long did it take, did you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
It well, to be honest with you, the funny thing was it didn't actually take me that long to implement it because I already had the knowledge. So all I needed
Oh,
to do was implement it. So what I mean, the learning part is probably the part that would take the time, but the implementation part didn't take that long because all I needed to do was to start to almost think of myself as a business analyst speaking to a client and then writing down what they wanted as requirements. And then also modeling the process. That didn't take long because I was intimately involved in the process. So it wasn't like I was interviewing people, asking them what their process were. I was simply just modeling the processes that I did and that we did
oh,
as a team. What
okay.
took part of that was practicing my BPMN sort of notation and my UML sort of notation, just kind of being like, okay, let me practice with a real life example. But then the more I did it, the more I started to open my eyes to like, wait a minute, we have some fundamental issues in our process anyway. Let me go back to my team and speak to them about it. And then come up with a to be process to say that this is what we could do differently in conjunction with the team. But it didn't take long per se, but it took courage. That's probably what I'd say.
I see. Okay, thank you. So it leads us to wonder, for those people we don't have
Mm.
experience. I think you have already covered a little bit about this question. It's like how to gain be a related experience without having the role. I think you already covered it, but maybe you can go deeper for this one.
Of
Yeah.
course, I'll touch on it. So, so the first thing I mentioned was about creating your own experience, and some jobs it may be difficult to do, but it does take creativity, and you may not be able to insert. For example, I wasn't in a role that was building software, so I wasn't able to do anything around like use cases, for instance, right? That's irrelevant, but um, you kind of have to creatively figure out what things could I try and do in my job. But remember, my day job wasn't to analyze processes
Mm,
for what I was doing. So I had to think outside the box. And I had to put in, I was doing that almost in my spare time, so to speak, when my job was a bit quiet or in between client calls and things of that nature. So
mhm.
I was kind of thinking, how can I creatively inject business analysis in my role? And I think that's the first thing. But the second thing, which my mentor taught me, he might be on the call actually, is to look back on your previous experience or what you've done in the past, because you may have done some business analysis activities without knowing it, right?
Yeah.
Because you may have um, done, say, a workshop, but probably didn't call it a workshop at the time when you did it. You may have um, influenced stakeholders to make senior stakeholders to make a decision, and you've done kind of options analysis, and you gave them a recommendation, but maybe you
Mhm.
didn't think of it in that way when you were doing it. You were kind of just doing your job. You may even have improved the process. Maybe you didn't build a process model, but you
Yeah.
looked at a process, you came up with a solution, you referred back to the senior leadership team and say, I think we should do things differently here because of XYZ reasons. And then that process changed, which led to XYZ results. You may have done that, but at
Mhm.
the time when you were doing it, because you didn't know the language of business analysis, you didn't call it requirements, you didn't call it process modeling, you didn't call it stakeholder engagement, but actually you may
Yeah.
have already done that. So that's two ways to do it. It's almost looking back and reframing your experience with business analysis language, but also at the same time, if you can in your current job, find creative ways to inject business analysis activities. And if you don't have a job, or you don't have the opportunity to do that in your current job,
Mhm.
I would 100% say look for volunteering opportunities. Um, or, for example, with this particular group, the Be a Career Meetup, you could volunteer for
Yeah.
this group. And as part
Mhm.
of you volunteering for this group, you could be exposed to things that lead to you getting some sort of exposure to doing business analysis activities. You may not do the full breadth of everything, but you may have exposure to do something.
Okay, great idea. So it's be creative, when you find opportunities in your current role, and review previous experience to try to rephrase the experience in the language of BA so that I can find some collection, and also find the volunteer opportunities. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There
Thank
are
you.
also training companies that you could potentially look at as well. That where you, as part of them training you, they'll also allow you to gain some sort of experience as well. But with those ones, you're probably looking at paying for that. So everything I've mentioned before that is you can do that in your own time. You just have to invest your time. But there are training companies where you might have to pay to then
Uh,
be exposed to
I
to
see.
those opportunities. But if you need more information, just ping me and I'll
Thank you.
signpost you to that. Yeah.
And speaking of transferable skills, could you share how to identify those? Just now you mentioned that in the second step, second
Mm.
method, review your previous experience and try to find those transfer skills or experience. So how can you share more in detail that how to identify those transfer skills and how to show them in your CV?
Sure. So there's there's soft skills and
Yeah,
hard skills, right? So
yeah.
let's start with the hard skills, business analysis hard skills. And I think the BA hard skills are things like actual business analysis stuff. So things like requirements management, process
Mm-hmm,
modeling, data mapping, wireframing. These are things that what we would call tools and techniques in the BA language, of things that a business analyst kind of does, right?
mm-hmm,
So that's the first list of skills. And those ones, yes, you have to kind of learn what they are, how to do it, and just kind of practice doing them to kind of build that initial bit of, okay, I understand why we do it, but also understand how they all link together and how they all work together. And those ones, it's effectively just putting in the effort to learn and practice, right? But on the flip side of that, the soft skills of business analysis are actually pretty common with quite a few jobs. So, you then have, say, your usual stakeholder management type
mm-hmm,
skills, which you could say problem solving or communication or critical thinking or analytical thinking. And a combination of those two things is then how you want to figure out, okay, transferably, what have I got or what have I done? Do you know what I mean? So let's just say, for instance, stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement. Um, like I said, when you learn about what that is and what that looks like, you may have already done that in the past. So it's
mm-hmm,
just a matter of learning the thing and reflecting back on your experience, whether that's at university or whether that's in a role, whether that's through an internship, and then asking yourself the question of, have I done that previously? And if the answer is yes to some degree, then yeah, absolutely. You can then say that's a transferable skill. Now, the same could be said about requirements, the same could be said about process modeling, but it's a matter of ensuring that you've practiced them as well as you've done them in the past. And so that it's kind of a link between those two things. Now, how do you identify them? Well, you just learn about what a BA does, and the more you learn about what a BA does, especially from somebody who can explain it in kind of plain English as opposed to using the BA jargon of what BA does, you can really start to make links and be like, oh, yeah, no, I have done that sometime, or I've done this previously, or I've done that in the past. Um, so I'll give you one example. I've one of the big things
mm-hmm,
that, be business analyst interviewers ask is, tell me a time when you dealt with a difficult stakeholder, right? And part of that is to understand how you are able to, on a project, to influence stakeholders who are either against the project and all the rest of it. And then you can look back and you think, oh, yeah, I have in the past dealt with a difficult stakeholder. It's just that I didn't think of it in that context because I wasn't working in a project, I wasn't working as a business analyst, but I have definitely I have definitely worked with a difficult stakeholder in the past. So that's how you kind of make the link. And then how do
mm-hmm.
you add them to your CV, or how do I do them in CV? It's literally just making sure that your CV is then uh, written in a way that speaks to the fact that you understand business analysis and you have done business analysis. So if I was, for example, to put something like um, dealt with a difficult client or a difficult team and help them to make a decision, that doesn't quite sound as strong as saying influenced stakeholders on a project to make a decision. So you kind of have to learn the language of business analysis to make sure that it's strong in your CV. And if you need some help with that, then obviously you need to get help with that. But that's kind of the way your CV kind of needs to be crafted. You kind of need to speak the language of business analysis so that when somebody's reading your CV, they get the confidence that you do know about business analysis.
I see. I think your suggestion really make me think because before I just go through my experience and I say, oh, which one I can transfer. But now it's like, I think you suggest you like you can list go through the skills that you need and try to think and try to reflect back if anything can match. So this way, I think
Exactly.
maybe I can get more inspiration.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I would encourage anyone to do with anything. Like look at the skill set and ask yourself, which of those do I tick? It doesn't have to be like 100%. You might be like, oh, maybe I'm 20% this and I'm 50% that and I'm 80% that. But the more you do that, the more you can then use that as a gauge to say, right, this is the job that I have the most transferable skills with. Because if I was looking at, say, for example, a software engineer or a developer, I have
Hmm.
absolutely zero in terms of learning or knowing any language to code. I have
Hmm.
absolutely zero in like working with like databases, absolute zero in building any data structures. So immediately that's like, yeah, I have no transferable skills at all in that space, but I did with business analysis.
Okay, so thank you. So with that foundation, just now we're talking about showing the transfer skills in CV. So the next step is about interviews. So could you
Mm.
share your strategies of showing yourself in interviews?
Yes. So the first thing I'd say is really just what you call it? There's something called the STAR technique, which some of you probably have heard of.
Ah,
STAR is an acronym. STAR is an acronym, STAR. S stands for situation, T
mm-hmm,
stands for task, A stands for action, and R stands for result. And what you want to do with that technique is effectively craft all your interview answers in that
mm-hmm,
technique. So, when you're preparing for an interview, you want to basically then say, okay, for the question that I may get asked about managing a stakeholder, let's just carry on with
mm-hmm.
that example. I need to think about what star technique was I in. So the situation was I was working in X company or X team, and there was a stakeholder who was difficult. T is then task, right? This is
Yeah.
what I did. Or sorry, this is what I was tasked with. This is what I was responsible for. So I was a person who decided to work with this difficult stakeholder. Action. This is where you then want to spend the most majority of your time. Talk about what you did specifically. Action. What exactly did you do? This is where you sell yourself, right? Action. I
Mm-hmm,
did this, I did that, and then I did that. Then the R, the result, is then where you point back to what your actions led to. What was the result of your actions? And therefore, so an example, I could say, okay, the action was I sat down with the stakeholder to understand why they were being difficult and what their issues were. I I communicated those points back to the wider team, and we discussed how we can resolve these issues. I went back to stakeholder and kind of explained what we're trying to accomplish. So you see how I'm talking about what I did. I'm not talking about what my colleague did or what my manager did. I'm just talking about what I did. And then at the end of that, the result is um the stakeholder changed their minds. They became so supportive of
mm-hmm.
what we were doing, and we were able to move things forward. So now you've sold yourself as somebody who can take, your action, but you can also connect what you did to the result. And for me, that's honestly the best thing you can do regarding selling yourself in interviews is the STAR technique. But the approach is to look at the job description, and from the job description, you will get a very good understanding of kinds of questions that they may ask you. Um,
I
and
see. It's very.
because if the job description doesn't talk about process modeling, for example, they may not
Mm-hmm,
even ask that question. But if the job description says we're looking for business analyst to map processes for a finance team because they're not going through a transformation, then you bet they want to ask questions about modeling processes and how you communicate that process back to the team. So you have to prepare that. So preparation comes from really reading the job description and understanding what are they looking for, and then crafting examples that effectively tick those boxes.
Oh, I see. So prepare according to the description of the job and answer the questions in a star format. Thank you. I
Exactly
think
that.
this, yeah, this will make us more, how to say, clear when we show us in the
When you're
interviews.
answering.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't waffle on and just kind of speak from the top of your head and just kind of like, oh yeah, maybe, and you don't sound confident.
Yeah, good technique. Thank you. I will try it next time. And now, as we draw closer to the end of our session, are there any other suggestions that you want to give to those professionals who want to transit into busy job?
Oh, okay. There's two camps. So I'll start off with those of you who maybe are like studying, should I say,
Mm-hmm.
and you're looking for the BA role. Okay, so it's not a career switch, but it's like you're looking to get that BA role. But for those in that position, I would say that especially if you're like I don't have many working experience and things of that nature. The first thing I'd say is everything I've touched on, do that. So learn about the role and try and figure out how you can put the learnings into practice and all the rest of it. But I would say 100% reach out, build your network, right? Reach out to as
Yeah.
many people as you can in this space. Invite people for a virtual chat and be like, hey, I'd love to just have a chat with you. Think about becoming a business analyst. I'd love to learn more about the role. And then the more conversations you have and the more you are able to say, this is my position. I'm in a position to, make the switch. I'm really passionate about becoming a business analyst. The more you can then really get some gems, some gems on, uh, yeah, this is how you can do it. These are the kind of things you can do. The reason why I say that is because when I started to do that I just mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I then realized somebody told me that um somebody told me to look in specifically in higher education and in public sector jobs because are more likely to have junior or associate business analyst positions. And this was
Mm-hmm.
back in 2018 at the time. And so that's what I did. And that's how I landed my first role. I would have never known that if I'd never had that conversation. I would have just applied to every company or anywhere. But I then
Mm-hmm.
specifically looked at, okay, what, somebody's going to give me that tip. And so that's the first thing I'd say, right? This is why your network is important. It's not just, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn. It's, hey, let's connect, but I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to have a chat with you, or get involved in events like this. So that's the first thing I'd say because you can really get some gems. Now, do everything I've mentioned, learn about the role, craft your CV very well, and interview techniques. The same applies to those of you who are currently working a job like I was in a different field and you want to transition into tech or into business analysis. Same thing, learn about the role and craft your interview techniques on your CV and network. But the slight difference that group have got is you may have experience in the past that you can easily transferably point to in interviews and on your CV. Now, with both of them, for me, it really comes down to a number of things. Number one, you can either kind of do the thing that I did, which is self-study, I guess, should I
Mm-hmm.
say, or self-led. So you read books, you go to webinars, you watch YouTube videos, and you keep trying and trying and trying and trying. You have conversations back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? That's the first thing. And if you do that, then you could do that and you can make it work. But for some of you, I was speaking to someone recently and they were saying to me like they want to do it, but they want to do it in 2 months. I'm like, okay, if you want to do it quickly, then you might need hand holding, you might need somebody to just kind of push you forward. And this is where mentoring comes in. And so for some of you is to consider getting some sort of maybe mentoring or some sort of coach or some sort of like a program that you can join, whatever that means. So it's then depending on how much time you wanted to give yourself to make this transition. If you want to do it
Mm-hmm.
very, very quickly, then mentoring could help because it will give you a what's the word? A focused attention like pathway to say do this and then do this and then do this and then do this. As opposed to when you're self-studying, you're just learning everything and you're just taking it all in and then it's up to you to make it make sense and put it all together. So that may take a bit of time. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, for both sides, whether you do it self-paced or mentored paced or whatever, the one thing I would say is to be consistent and do it fully and like go for it 100%. Don't just say I've applied for 10 jobs and I'll give up. It's not working for me. Or go to like two interviews and get told no twice and then think, this is it. Like looking for jobs is a numbers game. You have to apply for, 100 jobs to maybe expect like 10, let's say 15 responses, to then expect about 8 interviews, and then if you're good, maybe get 1 or 2 offers. Like it's honestly just a numbers game. So you have to really just keep going at it and keep applying and keep going to interviews. Eventually you will get better and better over time, and then you will land that role.
Thank you. So to quickly recap, so for those students, I think the most important thing is building the network. And for all of them, it's like study by yourself, and also you can get mentor or coach from others so that it can help you save time. Also be consistent, don't give up. Yeah. So my
So yeah,
actually personally, I still have a little bit confused
sure.
because for the networking, I think I know that it's very important, especially here in Wellington, because Wellington is very small city. But the problem is that for me, it's still a little bit daunting. I don't know how to open a chat with the people on LinkedIn and how to ask them out. Yeah. So can you give example or more
Mm,
detailed tips on that? Yeah.
of course, of course. Okay, so the first thing, this is a very good question actually. So LinkedIn, number one, if you're wondering why LinkedIn, it's actually basically it's the easiest place to go to find professionals, should I say.
Yeah.
I have Instagram and all the TikTok and whatever, but like on those ones, you wouldn't know that I'm a business analyst. But on LinkedIn, you will 100% know that I'm a business analyst. So that's the first reason with LinkedIn. It's the easiest place to find professionals. And you can Google the job title. So they say business analyst, not Google, sorry. You can search within LinkedIn business analyst and see business analysts in either in your city or in your field or whatever. And then when you've done that, right, you can then connect with people. Let's just say you find people in Wellington. You mentioned Wellington. You find
Yeah.
people in Wellington, you connect with them. When you make that connection on LinkedIn, you can add a note with every connection. And that always would suggest that you add a note. And you say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hi, I'm Thando. I'm interested to learn about business analysis. I'd love to have I'd love to connect with you." That's kind of the first thing. And then if they accept the connection and if they respond to your message and say, "Hey, thanks, great to connect," that's your way in. You can then say, "Oh, great. And I'd love to, have a chat with you, 15-minute chat about business analysis. Please let me know, if you'd be willing to have this chat and what your calendar or your schedule looks like, and all the rest of it." And they may say yes, they may not respond, but if they do respond and say, "Okay, sure, no problem," and that's
Mm-hmm.
it, right? You can then say, "Great, let's schedule some time. Here's my email or here's my number, call me, whatever makes sense for you." And then that's it. That's how you get started. But this is where this is at this point is where many people make the mistake. And this is where you can be on in the top 1%. Many
Mm-hmm.
people make the mistake of having that conversation and then that's it. That's it. They
So,
stop
so
there,
what's your tip? Yeah.
right? My tip
Mm,
is to then go back to that same person and say, "Hey, I've, let's say it's like the month later. Hey, last time we met, we spoke about XYZ, and I really appreciate your tips. I've now put into action what you told me, and I've now done this,
mm.
and I've now done that, and I just want to thank you." Or I just want to thank you and maybe ask you a follow-up question that's more specific this time. And then you find
Oh.
that by doing that, all of a sudden, to that person, you're now on their radar more than the other people who just had an initial chat. Now,
Mhm.
if you're strategic, and I would say be strategic, and by strategic, I mean connect with, say, for example, business analyst managers or senior
Mhm.
business analysts, or lead business analyst. If you did that, right, they might even just let you know, like, "Oh, we've actually got a job opening coming up soon if you're interested."
Oh, I see. It's a good technique. I think it's somehow like you apart from just the simple talk, this person somehow become your coach, yeah, and uh
If Exactly, yeah, almost like a coach, almost like
because
a mentor or a friend, whatever you
yeah,
want to call it. But yeah,
yeah, because you have taken it into action and give the feedback and ask and based on that you can have a deep talk and maybe maintain a long-term relationship.
exactly,
Already, it's
and
really
it might
useful.
even
Yeah,
lead to a job offer. Mali, to a job offer. You never know. I know many people who've landed jobs not because they applied for it, but because they were approached or they were told, we have a job coming up in our team if you're interested. And by the way, for those of you who are in another job, uh, currently you're working for an organization, and
Mm,
even if you're not working business analysis, you can follow this exact same principle with technical teams in your company, right? You can start to build that connection with the another business analyst in your company, or with the project manager in your company, or with a delivery manager, whatever that means. And that again could lead to like, oh yeah, no, we really like this person. Come and shadow us for a day and see what we do for a day. And then when they have an opening up for a role, they might even just say, hey, we've got an opening coming up soon. I think you should apply for it. And because you're internally within the organization and you've built that
mhm.
connection, like you've already won half the battle.
Thank you. It's really practical suggestion. And now I think we have already done our chat session, and we will move on to the Q&A session. So we will use Slido to for the Q&A session, and you can send the questions to Slido or vote for the questions that you want to be answered along the talk. To access Slido, you can scan the QR code or input the code number on slido.com. Also, you can click the link that Terranum has shared in the chat box. Now we have already got some questions. Let's have a look. Sorry. Oh, we have so many questions. So you can vote for the questions that you want to be answered first, because we don't have enough time to answer all of them, I think. So we will come to our first one. Yeah,
I'll fly through the answers.
yeah. What
Let's go.
suggestion? Yeah, what suggestions would you give to aspiring BAs who are facing a highly competitive market right now, when more experienced people are competing for junior roles? Yeah, it's
So
a
my
good question.
suggestion, it's a very
Yeah.
good question. My suggestion for this is actually number one is to um think outside the box. So don't just think, okay, that if you're, I'm assuming that your CV is kind of, you've done the work to make your CV like really well, and you've kind of done the best you can in that arena. Then I would say when you apply for a job, reach out to the hiring manager immediately or the recruiter immediately and say, hey, I've just applied for a job, but I'd love to have a 15-minute chat with you about the job and what you're looking for. So you kind of have to then take extra steps to sell yourself, because maybe your CV, as you said, if they're looking at two CVs, your CV is there, but another person's who's more experienced CV is next to them, they might immediately reject yours. So you want to then not just send your CV, but send your CV and ask for a phone call at the same time to then really sell your experience and
Oh.
talk through what you're saying. That way, your name gets on their radar. Now, that may not work immediately, but it may work eventually. So that's one
Oh,
tip I would have. But because we've got so many questions, that's the only tip I'll give for now.
okay. So the next one is, how did you keep momentum while getting
Mhm.
or rejection?
So, to be honest with you, it's for me, it was because I decided that I wanted to become a business analyst. I'd learned about it. I'd invested, like really wanted to do it. So for me, it was like 100%. This is what I want. And so that's the first thing. I think internally you have to really be 100% confident and sure that this is the road that you want to take. Now, how do you then keep momentum when you're getting rejection? Is to then actually understand that a rejection is not personal. In fact, job hunting is not personal. That's the first thing. It's a business decision at the end of the day. Like a company is looking to fill a role, and they're just looking for somebody who can fill that role the best way that they feel is the person who can fill that role best. It's not personal. They're not saying no to you personally. They might be saying no to your CV because the CV is not well written, or maybe you just didn't sell yourself well in interviews. So when you detach your personal self, the rejections stop feeling personal. All of a sudden, you just be like, yeah, okay, on to the next. So it's almost like a mindset shift, really, more than anything.
Great. Okay, quick, quick this one. So next one is, you prepared yourself with certain level of tech skills. How strong do you agree tech skills are critical to make your CV standing out?
So to be clear, I don't know how to code at all. I have no idea. But what when we talk about tech skills, I'm speaking specifically with business analysis skills, and and if I'm being honest, they're not really like coding. It's not like I'm learning code. It's more like I'm learning the tools and techniques of business analysis. So you can just Google that, tools and techniques of business analysis, and then you can start to learn them. Now, you don't have to learn all of them, but you can learn kind of the main ones. So I agree that business analysis skills are critical to make a CV stand out for sure, because that's how you showcase yourself to be somebody who understands and knows the role. But if you're looking at, this is where it comes back to the whole idea of when you read the job description and you're looking at what they're looking for, if you have got like, I mean, personally for me, if I've got 50% of what they're looking for, I'm applying for it. And in my CV, I'll make sure that that 50% is well and clearly written, that they will make no mistake about it, that I do have the skills of that. So that's how you can make the link and stand out in that way.
Okay. Our next question is, can you recommend a great mentor?
I
Maybe
know many
yourself.
great mentors, maybe myself, you never know. But one thing I'd say is that with this one is reach out to me on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
because it depends on where you are on the journey. If you are like, you have no idea what business analysis is and you want to learn, that's different from somebody who um is kind of in the field, but they want help with like getting a role properly, or maybe you want somebody to help you with your CV and your LinkedIn profile and all that. So it depends what you're looking for. But I'll say just DM me on LinkedIn and let's talk, and then I'll then recommend depending on what you're looking for.
Okay. So please reach out to Thando on LinkedIn. Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe you will be our first connection. Thank you. And how do I get an opportunity of going into interview if my current work uh ticks all the boxes as a BA, but my job title is not a BA?
Yeah. And this comes back to what I was saying earlier about when you apply for the job, call the recruiter or call the hiring manager or reach out to them on LinkedIn. So some of the people you can easily find out who the hiring manager, most of the time anyway, is on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to them and say, "Hey, I've just applied. My name is this, um, and my job title is that." But this is what I would say to you on your experience on your CV.
Hmm.
Under your, so let's just say like I was in sales, so my job title wasn't business analyst either. It was relationship manager. But underneath that, I didn't put the things I did as a relationship manager. I put the bullet points of the things I did which link to business analysis only. So I didn't start talking about, like, for example, I could have said I manage a portfolio of £2 million worth of clients. But that's got nothing to do with business analysis. So they don't care about that. So I don't put that in there. But
Oh,
what they want to know is business analysis stuff. So you want to almost craft your CV to make it sell yourself as a business analyst, not as a salesperson, because I'm not applying for sales jobs,
I see. Great.
right?
Next question is, what are some practical steps someone within organization with a BA team or function can do to promote their skill side to become a BA?
So if you're within an organization, to promote your skill set, promotion means get yourself out there. It means don't just do things and just upload them to a cloud somewhere and send someone a link and then hope for the best. It means get yourself out there. Start having conversations with senior leaders. Start having conversations with, heads of departments or even other business analysts. If they have got a community as a practice, bring up what you've done in that community as a practice or in that team meeting. If they don't have one, just get yourself out there. Start being like, hey, can I have a chat with you? Again, this is all about networking, but you're networking internally. So it's the same thing. You're just networking internally and putting yourself out there and saying, this is what I've done. And maybe even get peer reviews and say, I've done this process map, for example. Like, what do you think? Does it make sense to you? Is it aligned with like what a business analyst does? And all of a sudden, you will start to people start to be like, oh yeah, you do know your stuff. Okay. And that's how you do it. So network and promote
Oh,
yourself.
I see. Thank you. Take this one. And the next question is, I'm having an experience of 5 years as a BA in banking domain. Now I'm
Awesome.
facing so much difficulty here in Wellington to get a single call for interview.
Yes. So for me, if you're struggling to get an interview, for me it means that when you're making the application for those jobs, you're not standing out or you're not selling yourself well enough for them to want to interview you. So, okay, think of the whole job thing as like dating, right? Like you wouldn't go on your first date looking rough. You know what I mean? Like you dress up, you look well, you put your fresh cologne and all that, and you want to look nice, and that's the job of your CV. Like you want it to look well for the person that you're going on a date with or trying to get on a date with, and therefore, if you're not getting called back, that basically means that your CV is not selling you well enough. If they also have a cover letter, the combination of your CV and your cover letter is not selling you well enough. If it's purely if you've again if your CV is actually pretty good, and again,
Hmm.
I would recommend you get that validated by somebody else, not just yourself. Because I thought my CV was good until I spoke to somebody and my goodness, they butchered it and they told me exactly what was wrong with it. So definitely get reviewed. But if that's the case, if your CV is good, then start going the extra mile and reach out to the hiring managers and the recruiters as well. But for me, I'm not gonna lie, your CV is the thing that would be the first thing to look at and really make sure that it's like crafted well enough for that CV to really sell yourself as somebody who really knows your stuff.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, I'm struggling with demonstrating relevant experience from the roles I've done to date. How would you suggest we circumvent this?
Yeah, I think we've covered this one already, to be fair. I think just look back to what you've done and okay, look at the skills of a business analyst and just try and make the link backwards. But again, this is something that my mentor taught me. So if you're wanting help and hand holding with that, then mentorship is definitely going to be the way to do it. So reach out to me on LinkedIn and we'll talk.
Yeah, great idea. So next question is, how do I tailor my resume to stand out with no experience but with transport skills from as an IT system administrator?
Well, you
Mm,
already have experience because you've got transferable skills, right? And that's the experience. It's the transferable bit. It's just like maybe you didn't have the job title of a business analyst, which is slightly different, but it's the same concept. Make sure that underneath your previous history, as in your career, like your IT systems administrator, your the bullet points you put underneath that job link to the transferable skills. Don't start
yeah,
talking about, I don't know, that you walk through people to fix their
IT robot.
Microsoft admin or something like that's not a BA role, so don't worry about that.
Okay, it's quite similar to the previous question. So what certification you did first as a BA?
So in the UK we've got something called BCS. So I did a BCS certification,
Mm-hmm.
which is similar to the IIBA. It's kind of like another thing. So I would say I did the kind of foundation certification. Um, so that's what I did to answer that question specifically.
Okay, I think we only have time to take two more questions. Yeah. Mm. Hi, Sandy, would you mind giving us any tips regarding certification? Oh, this one is, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want?
Okay, I'll cover all the certification questions in one, and I'll simply say that
Yeah,
um, certifications are great. Certifications are good for learning, increasing your knowledge, and increasing your confidence. But in business analysis world specifically, getting a certification does not directly link to getting a job. You can get a job without certifications, and you can get a job with certifications. There isn't a requirement, at least in the UK. I don't know if Wellington is different in New Zealand, but in the UK, most jobs don't say must have certifications. They usually put the certifications as a nice to have. So what that tells you is certifications are great, but if you're thinking of getting a certification because you're thinking it will get you a job, then that's not going to be the answer. But it'd be great for you to learn about business analysis, so definitely do it for that purpose. So that covers all the certification-y stuff.
yeah. Okay, take this one. Also this one, yeah. Oh, any group,
You
study
can
group
go
of,
you can Google that. Definitely Google that one. It depends on your local space.
yeah, course tag. What are most two favorite BA courses or techniques that you found most useful in your
Oh,
BA career?
Wow, that's a lot of questions. So techniques
Maybe this
specifically?
this last one. Yeah, maybe this one last one. Yeah.
Sure. So techniques specifically, I'll probably say, um, that's man. Okay, so I'll probably say for me it was understanding, just process, right? Thinking process and understanding processes. That's the first thing, and then the second thing is then understanding requirements. So those are two key techniques that I personally say have really helped me in my career. Courses that's a whole different thing. So about DM me on LinkedIn and we can talk about that one. Same thing with our hackathon and jams, DM me on LinkedIn and suggestions, differentiate someone BA developer role to a BA role. I'd probably say we've covered most of that type of
Yeah.
thing.
We will
Um,
after the event we can go through summarize, and if
sure.
there's anything that we could cover with you, can you help cover that later in the email?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So thank you so much for all the invaluable insights you have shared today. And a huge thanks to everyone who joined us tonight too. And after event, we will upload the recording to our YouTube channel. You can review the event if you want to. And if you like our event, please refer our meetup to your friends. And then our next event will be on 23rd April, and we will talk about career evolution model for migrant tech worker in New Zealand. We'll launch the event on Meetup soon, so please keep an eye on the notification. Okay, it's all for today. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope to see you next time. Thank you, Thando.
Thank you, everyone. It's been super fun.
Yeah, please remember to follow the podcast. Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, thank you, Mavis. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank you,
for having me.
everyone.
Thank you.